Normally, when I preach a sermon, I try to make it something that is called evergreen, something that would work any day when you need to hear it. Today, I am not. For today, on the calendar is the Sunday before Halloween. Now, when I was growing up, Halloween was all about trick-or-treating. You got to pick a costume. Eventually, we got into trick-or-treat for UNICEF, and you would go around knocking on doors with a little cardboard box, and they'd give you a couple of coins and a piece of candy. And maybe your family was one of those that carved a pumpkin, but not everybody did. And as time has passed since my Halloweens and my kids' Halloweens, I've looked back at Halloween, and it is now much bigger and scarier. Halloween, when I was growing up, was buying costumes like the second week of October, maybe. Now, all of those Halloween decorations are in stores even before the last of the school supplies has been bought, and in many cases, even before school has even started. I think I saw the first pumpkins available at a local store the first week of August. It's a long way from Halloween. And when I was growing up, Halloween was just a day. It wasn't a whole season. After you had Halloween, you had a break, and you had a day when you went to somebody's house and you ate turkey and you watched football. And then came the Christmas season. But nowadays, we seem to rush everything so quickly. When my spouse was working at a local store, Halloween night was the night that Christmas trees went out. And now, frequently, they're out by Labor Day. What happened to this holiday, this Halloween? How did it get started, and how did it get kind of hijacked? And what is our role as Christians in this whole thing? That's kind of what I want to look at today. So let's turn back time to the beginning of Christianity, in fact, while Christ was still alive. And John the Baptist was beheaded. And it says in the Bible that his disciples took his body and buried it with reverence. John the Baptist was the first martyr for the Christian cause. And then we have record in the Bible of Stephen. And then as Christianity, or the Way as it was called, began to spread, the Roman Empire got very worried about it. And they started crushing the souls of those who were Christians. They were putting them in prison, and they were killing them. And a time when you could have had a single martyr or saint's day was gone. For many people were put to death in the Colosseums and on crosses across the Roman Empire. Too many to have each one have a day. So the early church decided we'll have one day when we celebrate everyone, All Souls Day. And eventually in 610, they kind of made a standard day for that, May the 1st. Now you think to yourself, May? Well then why do we have Halloween in November? Well, that's because of Pope Gregory III. He set up a space to hold relics of saints and martyrs and apostles and all of those faithful Christians that had gone on before. And supposedly, he dedicated that reliquary on November the 1st, 732. So this spring holiday, which kind of made sense if you think about it. Think what other holiday associated with Christianity we celebrate in springtime. It is Christ's resurrection. It is the death of Christ and his resurrection. It makes sense to think about all of those other Christians that have died and are awaiting their own resurrection. It made sense. So, but Pope Gregory said, nope, November the 1st it shall be. And by 1200, this had actually expanded into 3 days. 3 days that are called holy days of obligation. The first day being All Hallowtide. All Hallows Eve was the first day. It was to be spent in praying and fasting. For the next day was All Saints' Day, and it was a big feast day in the Catholic Church. Every saint had a food that was associated with it, and your local village would have made their own saints' feast food, as well as feast foods of the bigger saints, the ones that they celebrated. And then would come November the 2nd, when you would celebrate All Souls' Day, the day when you were to remember all good Christians who had gone on ahead and who were awaiting their resurrection. So how did we get from this really holy time of remembering saints and fellow Christians to costumes and trick-or-treating and all kinds of things that we associate with the holiday now? Well, I'm here today to tell you that a couple of those things have actually Christian roots to them. Trick-or-treat was actually an outcome of All Souls' Day, which we just discussed. It's a day when you would go around and knock on people's doors, and they would give you a soul cake. It was a small piece of bread with a cross carved on it. And for receiving the bread, you promised to pray for that family's souls. A soul cake. So we can understand how knocking on doors and getting food, I don't think they understood the concept of candy corn, but we understand where it started. This trick-or-treat concept was, give me a piece of bread and I will pray for your family. But where did this concept of costumes come from? That has nothing to do with Christianity, does it? Well, it sort of does. Because you see, on All Saints' Day, November the 1st, the churches would bring out the mementos they had of saints that might be a bone or a piece of something that they had touched or a piece of clothing. But let's face it, there were a lot of scams in those days. Every church had to have a thing, so everybody was kind of, not everybody, but those with the right mindset were kind of creating fake relics. And what would happen if your church couldn't afford a relic? What if you were too poor to even afford a fake? Well, the church came up with their own solution to that. What if on All Saints' Day you came dressed as a saint? You were wearing a costume to church, but you were honoring the saints. Now, how did it get to be this concept of ghosts and ghouls and witches, and I don't know what the costumes are this year, but it comes out of another thought about Halloween, since we had moved the Halloween time to December, January, February, March, November, October. October, that time when all of the things in the gardens had died. That time when you had to have things put away and put up for the winter or you would not survive. That time when you would have thought about death in a different way. Well, the custom arose that that night, that All Hallows Eve or Halloween, was the night that the veil between earth and the other world was the thinnest it was going to be all year. Now, I don't believe that, but this is the story. And it was the night that the souls that had gone through the year had their last chance. They were walking this earth, and before they crossed over tomorrow morning, this was their last chance to get vengeance on those who were walking the earth still alive. But you didn't really want that to happen to you. So you started to wear a costume. They couldn't figure out who you were. They couldn't exact their vengeance upon you. And eventually, this became walking through the woods and through cemeteries, dressed as ghouls, but always praying for those in the cemetery, and praying for those as you walk through the woods who had passed and didn't lay in a grave. But what about other things, black cats and all of those things? Well, I mean, our scriptures today even talk about two things that we frequently associate with Halloween. This concept of divination. It says that Paul and Silas were going into town and they found this woman who had a gift of divination. She was foretelling the future. And she was making a lot of money for her owners. Think about all of those signs you see as you pass through certain parts of town. Psychics, tarot readings, palm readings. Come in and find out about your future. It still holds true today. But that was not a gift of God. That was a gift of a spirit, lowercase s. And it says that Paul and Silas, Paul turned around. He was very annoyed with her because she kept calling, "These men are followers of Jesus Christ. Listen to them and they will proclaim salvation to you." And Paul kind of got tired of it and he said, "Come out of her in the name of Jesus Christ." And the spirit left her. And her owners got very upset because now she could no longer earn them any money. And they threw them in prison. We are warned in this story, this tale from Acts 16, that there are spirits of divination, but they're not from God many times. So, something that maybe we do, we don't even think about. Have you ever bobbed for apples? Well, when bobbing for apples was a really popular game played in parties with boys and girls, a girl would put a little symbol on an apple and then throw it into the pot to be dunked for. And the game was that the boys would come along and get the apple, and whoever's little symbol was on the apple was the one they were supposed to marry. I don't know how frequently it worked out, but it was just a little harmless game, right? Not really. Or how about the story of the demoniac? He was so filled with demons that he lived in the cemetery. They gave him enough strength to break chains, and everybody was scared of him. And there are demons, I believe. There are things that control our lives that we have allowed to come in. But Jesus here today says, people knew that the demoniac was in trouble. But as soon as the demoniac saw Jesus, he ran up to him and said, "What do you want to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High, do not torment me. I mean, can you imagine being demons around Jesus? That'd be pretty tormenting to the demons. And Jesus says, come out. Doesn't even say in my name, and he just says, come out. And the demons pleaded for another time, oh, please, don't destroy us. And Jesus said, okay, there's some pigs. You can go into them. And they did. All of those demons went into the pigs, and they went over the hill. So what are we supposed to learn from this passage? What do demons have to do? Well, James 2:19 says, you believe that God is one. You do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. So where does that leave us as Christians here today, as we face this time when, for various reasons, we're laughed at for not celebrating this holiday? We're laughed at for telling other people not to celebrate the holiday, and yet, as we just learned, the holiday really has its earliest foundations in this memorializing of the dead. But one of the other things that Christians did around this holiday, and have done for many years, is this is a time when they renew their faith. So, if I were to ask you, what is the great thing that you know? What delights and stirs your soul? What would you answer? I mean, we sing a hymn called Ask Ye What Great Thing I Know. What is your answer? This Halloween, this time of memorializing those who have passed on. Now here at Timonium, we will remember those who have passed on next week with our All Saints' Day service, when we light a candle to remember those of our parishioners who have passed away during the year, and we remember others of us who have passed away and moved on. But what is it that this great thing is that I know that will permit me to fight demons, permit me to only focus on Christ? It is just this: Jesus Christ, the crucified. Jesus Christ, the risen. So as you move through this holiday, find a way to celebrate it maybe in a little more Christian way. As you hand out the Halloween candy, say a little prayer as you drop the candy in the bin. If you see a child out that night that kind of looks a little lost, take a moment and ask them. If you see a child afraid, say, oh no, it's just make-believe. But in your heart, always remember, Christ is first, and Christ should be our goal, always and forever. Amen.